Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Games that are nothing short of Pokemon Odysseys. Absolutely classic entries in the series that can easily be viewed as perfect in so many ways. Especially with Emerald as that deluxe version of the generation. There seems to be near universal agreement from the community that this is one of the greats. Right up there with Platinum, Heart Gold, and Soul Silver. There's an extremely complete feeling to it, as the game is absolutely packed with content and activities. But that still hasn't stopped people from trying to make it all the greater. There's plenty that you could lovingly view as missing from these games, especially with a distant, post-release point of view. There's some missing legendaries and their stories, unfulfilled or no longer possible events, and certain minor oddities like the White Rock or the rocket launches with seemingly untapped potential. Community members have gone to great lengths to hone in on these aspects and make the game that they already love so much even more incredible, leading to the creation of plenty of ROM hacks and patches with the express purpose of making Emerald and Ruby and Sapphire rise even higher, and that love for the game really shines through. But try as we might, the game itself, at its core, was and is a done deal. They were released at a time where there was generally no room for updates or bonus content, so that core game is locked into history. We can only create homages to these wonderful cartridges. At least, that's what I thought. Because as you might have gathered from the title of this video, there's something new on the scene that has caught my eye. Working DLC has been created, as authentically as it possibly could be, for the Gen 3 Game Boy Advance titles, that is completely compatible with original, vanilla, garden variety cartridges, fulfilling some of that missed potential, telling new stories, and creating new experiences all alongside the original hardware. The incredible developer of this DLC, I'm a Blissey, has created something here I consider so monumental and incredibly important, not only for Gen 3 and the Pokemon community, but perhaps even for video games and their preservation as a whole. And it's this significance that I want to discuss today. But let's first do a brief overview of what we're looking at here so we're all on the same page. This DLC was created very purposefully to feel like the mystery gifts and legendary storylines of the original time period, such as visiting Latios or Latios on the legendary Southern Island, or hunting down the elemental birds in Fire Red and Leaf Green, with the actual content that you and I can play at home being more of those special encounters with legendaries or mythicals that for whatever reason didn't make the base cut of the games. And in some special cases, there's even been additional puzzles and stories attached to the encounters. You can grab everything you need right now over on Blissey's page, but unbelievably, there's no hacking required here, at least for end users like you and me. Because despite the long list of custom events, Pokemon, and stories, Blissey went to extreme lengths to emphasize authenticity in every step of the process. And so the events are just as quote-unquote real as any other you'd experience during the original time frame. The Pokemon pass legality checks all the way up to home, there's no need for save editing or injecting in any form, and it all runs on original physical hardware. And all of that is possible because of the Nintendo eReader, an oft-forgotten GBA accessory with the express purpose of adding extra content to games by using its scannable cards in lieu of online or wireless downloads. You run the eReader on one Game Boy, scan a compatible code card, and then send the bonus content to the actual game running on a second Game Boy. Yeah, it's a bit of a bulky process. And now, years and years later, Blissey has amazingly deconstructed, reverse engineered, and I dare say even improved that original functionality through the advent of their own custom code cards. You scan the card for Jirachi, for example, and a special encounter at the Moss Deep White Rock gets sent to your cartridge with no issue. That's the long and short of the experience for the general player or spectator. If you're curious about all the juicy technical details on how they were coded and designed, you should definitely check out the videos Blissey themselves did on the entire project. Links are in the description and on screen. But I'm more of a fledgling coder myself. You know, hello world and all that. So those finer details are all a bit over my head. But that's just fine, because this is more of a focused analysis and or review type of thing. The main focus I'm concerned with here, and ultimately amazed at, is that it works, it all checks out, and most importantly, it's fun. More than fun, even. Magical might be a better word. This DLC isn't just a logistical port and preservation of Gen 3 era mystery gifts and distributions. It goes above and beyond that bar. It captures the magic and mystery we experienced playing these games for the first time, with new entries in their legends and lore. The mystique of uncovering the Reggies for the first time, the thrill of summoning Deoxys on Birth Island. Those feelings are here, captured completely. And that's because the emphasis isn't just on software and hardware authenticity, experience authenticity was emphasized as well. These are new stories thematically indistinguishable from those of old. And I was having a Ratatouille food critic moment the entire time I was playing them. It took me back to 10 years old, Game Boy Advance in my hand. Okay, but really this time, how is all of that even possible? Because I'm telling a pretty fantastical tall tale here. What makes this so different from the rest? Why am I saying it feels so real in the real way? Well, as most stories go, I think it would be best to start at the beginning. And here that means with the application and incredible hardware of the eReader device. Because while Gen 3 was finished, there was that outside but still official way to receive some new data. The third generation of games was uniquely equipped to interface with the eReader and receive additional, albeit very limited, post-release content. Pokemon would release cards with special barcodes printed on them, and when scanned with the eReader and then linked to a Pokemon game, you could get some bonus items and trainer battles that served to extend the experience of the games. The cards functioned like a very basic, but also physically linked DLC for the generation. A very clever idea for the technical limitations of the Advance, but unfortunately one that wasn't too popular in the US, and support for the device was ultimately very limited. The bonuses in mainline games were only even offered for Ruby and Sapphire outside of Japan, and these bonuses are extremely supplementary. I feel like even calling them that is generous. There are a handful of new and pretty unique berries that ended up being Ruby and Sapphire exclusive because of how this card support works, and then some battle tower type trainers you can fight in a special area of Moss Deep City, behind the boxes in that one house. Now don't get me wrong, these are definitely cool and good things, but I'm a little critical of them because each trainer and berry comes from an individual card. There isn't something like a berry expansion or trainer package you can do all at once. Each card corresponds to a single item or matchup, and is just a tiny bit underwhelming as standalone bonus content. Which is too bad because simply using the device was and continues to be a purely fun experience. Yes! Physically swiping these lovely trading cards adorned with sprite work and set design. The fanfare of the eReader's menus and music as you accept an event. The soft tune that plays as the device tells you to go check out the boons of your swipe. There's a level of follow-through here across the experience that feels very golden age Nintendo. It's not just something you do to get stuff, it's an experience that was curated from beginning to end. And for that reason, I have to offer some give on my earlier criticism. Because the unique method of delivery for this experience brings the downside of file size limits. A card's horizontal dot code, as they were called, could store 1.8 kilobytes of data, and the long vertical code could store 2.8. And yeah, that's not a ton of space. So individual downloads makes a lot of sense. And then that could be paired with the charming trading card angle, as the majority of the cards were bought in packs very similar to regular Pokemon cards. Plus your only limit on swiping is the number of cards that you possess. So sure, you're just gonna be in for a lot of swiping. And I mean a lot of swiping. Sometimes the scanner doesn't catch them right the first, second, third, or 15th time, unless you're extremely gentle and deliberate with your swipe. But those ideas of the item or trainer package I floated earlier are possible as long as you as the player is serious about collecting the cards. Usual applications aside, however, there is one card in particular that powerfully stands above the rest, and does offer that wow factor any player would hope for in their DLC. Tucked away in remote waters of the Hoenn region, Southern Island awaits trainers brave enough to make the ocean voyage. Those lucky enough to have scanned the Eon Ticket eReader card will be able to visit this island home of the legendaries Latios and Latios, for an exclusive chance at catching the member of the pair that doesn't natively appear in their game. So Latios and Ruby, and Latios and Sapphire, and whichever you didn't choose on the TV in Emerald. Once you have scanned the e-reader card, or your ticket in this case, because even the packaging is thematic, you'll receive the actual item in-game from your dad at the Petalburg gym. And then you'll be sent on a charming mini-story where you team up with a sailor at Lily Cove to visit the mysterious island, which quickly culminates in the encounter with a legendary. Not to mention the laddie twin that you catch will be holding the Soul Dew, a personal held item for the pair that is seriously good and an exclusive benefit to this event. And all things considered, this is simply perfection. This is that beauty I enjoy being surrounded by oh so much. The Eon Ticket event isn't too over the top or overwhelming, but it certainly isn't too little either, and they committed to the bit the entire way through. I think there's good and legitimate reason players yearn for this style of event so much, in an age where the concept seems all but forgotten by Pokemon itself. They were extremely well designed and offered an extremely positive experience for the general player base. They don't offer anything over the top in terms of story. It's usually just a short trip like this one to a special location that has a unique encounter. And certainly the end goal is that Pokemon. You go to Southern Island to get Latios, just like you go to New Moon Island to get Darkrai. That's the raw cause and effect if you remove all the emotion from the equation. And that's exactly what happened with Pokemon like Volcanion and Zeraora that were distributed straight to players. No event story in game. Still cool, but that emotion and attachment gets stripped away when you remove these little journeys. And it's arguably the most important part. It's the experience. Let's follow that experience using the Eon ticket here as an example. Your dad receives a strange letter addressed to you with an unfamiliar boat ticket inside. Even though he's a big-time gym leader in Hoenn, he's never seen anything like this before, so he recommends you get it checked out in Lily Cove City, a port town with a ferry service. The sailors there will probably have a better idea about what's going on. So you take the ticket to the shipyard and try to present it to the attendant, but you're interrupted by a gruff and rugged sailor who likes saying stuff like, "Oi, matey!" So you know he's serious about sailing. He knows of the location on the ticket, but it's still largely unclear what lies in wait on the island. Oi, matey, etc. It's a thrilling and exciting mystery for him, so he's willing to take a trip with you. Anchors away. After the boat ride and actually on the island, you find a winding, grassy path running through a dense ocean of trees. Other than a bare-bones platform for the boat to dock at and some simple stairs up the path, the island appears to be completely untouched by humans. The music is the same theme that plays at the abandoned ship, and it's fitting for another location that seems to have been forgotten by time, albeit maybe for a different reason. There's almost a mystical, divine quality to the place because of these things, like you might be the first person who's walked this path in a very long time. At the end of the way, before an entrance to an enclosure within the forest, you find a sign that reads, What does this mean? Who put it here? Why is it on this island? There's simple but soul-searching intrigue contained in this signpost. It's a somber but also hopeful sentiment. Even though my memories become more distant with time, I'd like to think that they'll always be a part of me, at least in some way. It's got me really thinking about my life. So, thanks, random signpost. Beyond the sign, you head inside the forest enclosure and find an unusual stone surrounded by a shallow puddle of water. The stone has an otherworldly appearance. It looks like a moon rock or something from another planet entirely. It commands interest to the center of the area, and upon interacting with it, the legendary dragon respective to your version descends from the skies and challenges you to a battle. A legendary encounter in a legendary place. And if you happen to check the rock again afterwards, you're greeted with another strange saying, all dreams are but another reality. Never forget. There's little to no concrete story here, but the short journey from swiping your real-life ticket to having the encounter is an evocative experience. They employ subtle storytelling that creates intrigue and inspires awe, and that's just the one. Events like these were littered across the games, both in the main story and event distributions. The Reggies, Deoxys, Darkrai, Shaman, Giratina, and Diamond and Pearl, just to name a few. But for me, there's an even more perfect delivery here with the Eon ticket because the packaging is perfect too. Not only did I get to have this special adventure on this special island, but I physically owned the ticket that got me on the boat. This is unprecedented immersion. There's an extreme dedication to the bit here. And so I think in some ways it is firmly the best event Pokemon ever held. I can confidently describe the gameplay and hardware that goes into it as an actual event. It really lives up to that word. And the only downside is that the Eon ticket was one of a kind in this way. It was that golden goose of the eReader. I can only dream of there being more events like it, fantasizing about those possibilities. What would this type of event have looked like for a Pokemon like Celebi? Or Raikou? Or Jirachi? What sort of music will we have heard? These are at the core of that missing potential. Those lost fragments I wish we all could have seen. But I find myself so happy now because I don't have to wonder anymore. With Blissey's DLC pack, we've got cards and stories for all those Pokemon, and more. Every legendary and mythical not covered in Gen 3's main stories has a card and event to go with it, and even some bonus ones on top. All compatible with Ruby and Sapphire, and even some extended support for Emerald. Every card scans indistinguishably from the real thing, and the games read them as such. The events were painstakingly coded and engineered to dispense the Pokemon identically to the way they did in their original events, except now they're all encounters instead of gifts. Even better. Like the Jirachi card, for example, has you fighting a carbon copy of the Pokemon Channel Jirachi, and it reads to the games as completely legal. It doesn't set off any flags. Now of course this doesn't make it the real thing. There's a big jump between legal and legitimacy. And we all collect and play for different reasons. So it's up to the individual in a lot of ways what all of this means to them, but they are all 100% legal by that technical definition, and as such can make a successful pass up to Pokemon Home. And I have to appreciate that excruciating level of attention to detail that went into making this as authentic as physically possible so much later after the fact. And the overall delivery on those ideas, it's perfect. Perfect. Everything. Down to the last minute detail. Every card is double-sided and filled with loving detail. The front side features a silhouette of the event Pokemon next to the game logo all in front of the event's location. And the back side shows a stylized Pokédex entry with a small blurb explaining the event story. The silhouetted side offers a subtle intrigue alongside a sleek, sort of classic Pokemon card aesthetic. While the Pokédex entry draws on the existing lore of each Pokemon and extends it into a brief story for the Hoenn region that you can go experience right this very second. Don't just take my word for it either, go play them right now. Everything is freely available to download, print, and set up on Blissey's page. But if you don't have the means to set it all up physically, cause yeah, that's a lot, they've got a guide to run the events completely digitally as well. No e-reader or cards required. They even set up the means to access the defunct eReader support on Emerald despite it normally not being accessible outside of Japan. The package just wouldn't be complete without all these accessibility measures too. No expense was spared in making sure the greatest number of people could experience this masterpiece. And so assuming you either went and played them for yourself, or you just want to keep hearing my lovely voice on the subject, thanks so much, let's talk about that experience. That being the thing you actually see and play with at the end of the day. A big part of the design here was to avoid receiving or encountering the Pokemon in the events at the Pokemon Center from the Mystery Gift Man. I really appreciate this subtle focus. There is a certain thrill in interacting with the Mystery Gift Man, but the overall process is definitely lacking when he just hands you a Pokemon. The Pokemon itself is generally pretty exciting, unless it's this one, but the experience itself is lazy at best. I like heading out for a battle, something like Darkrai or Shaman, or even better a mini-story like Zoroark and the Shiny Beasts in Black and White 1. And to my absolute delight, here with the cards, every Pokemon is an encounter out in the overworld with locations based around lore to do with that respective Pokemon, some more thematic than others. And it makes sense because there's not a perfect place for every one of these legends in the Hoenn region. Like Mew, for example, is fought in the tall grass on Route 120. There's no story reason for Mew to be here, but the route itself is reminiscent of the island Mew is caught on in its native event, so it still makes enough sense. And in the end, it's ultimately super well done. as the object Mew is mapped onto is one of the invisible Kecleons. And one of Mew's most noteworthy abilities in media and stories surrounding it is to turn invisible, so I think it still offers on that experience, even with it being sort of a what-if scenario. Now the only snag with this, and a few of the cards, is that it can be a little difficult to know where to go on the route and what to interact with, as the events are all mapped onto existing objects with their own functions, like Mew on the Kecleon tile, or Entei on this boulder, for instance. This mapping encounters onto objects is just a symptom of the way the events had to be created though, and they couldn't exist otherwise, but this tiny weakness is almost made into a strength through the cards themselves. Because the picture of the location on the card shows you exactly where you need to go. They're cleverly focused on the event's location. Like Meteor Falls is a pretty big place, but I know that I need to get to this exact location before I start interacting with things. Makes it a lot easier. If you're doing it without looking at the cards or Blissy's videos, it's just a little extra bit to be aware of. My absolute favorite out of the batch has to be Jirachi and the White Rock, because this one is total wish fulfillment for me. I was one of those kids on one of those playgrounds that was absolutely convinced Jirachi was somehow tied to this rock. And I think that makes sense, because there's so much about the location in-game that sticks out to anyone with a sense for RPGs. It makes you feel like they have to be telling you something with this. An off-colored rock at a space-themed location? An NPC even tells you that it's vaguely related to wishes? I think it's more shocking that Jirachi isn't related to the rock in some way, and so it's incredibly satisfying to actually swipe the physical card, head to Moss Deep, get some light dialogue about wish-making, and then fighting it out with Jirachi in royal fashion. Talk about being surrounded by beauty, cause this is it. The pinnacle of this project, in my opinion, and the extent of this magical creation is best captured in the cards for the Jotho beasts. Blissey went the extra mile with these ones, as all 3 cards are part of an overarching story that you have to play in order to get the whole thing. And there's even a 4th bonus card thrown in to wrap up the story and hand out some extra rewards. These are miles beyond just simple encounters. These stories rival, if not altogether eclipse, the Eon Tickets experience. You've seen from the Jotho region wants your help as he tracks down Suicune and needs to find Entei and Raikou along the way. You'll have to solve braille puzzles, take down mighty foes, and enjoy references to Pokemon's extended lore as you go on a quest for the ages. You can trust that those who succeed and make it to the 4th card will be rewarded handily. I'm resistant to say too much though, because I had such a good time playing them on stream for the first time, and I really can't recommend these specific cards enough. They were able to uniquely cram NPC interactions and braille puzzles into these ones, and it's all contained in these 4 tiny code cards, and I got to experience them on my childhood cartridge. This whole project is truly a miracle to me. These cartridges, this generation, they were pushed to their absolute limit with these cards. New, but also unobtrusive content for games that came out so long ago. It's the absolute dream scenario for a fan of a retro game. So I implore you to check the cards out, try the events for yourself, get set up with an e-reader if you can find one, and hopefully rekindle some of that childhood whimsy. Because if you're looking for the way that these games made you feel when they first came out, then look no further, because here it is. It's one of the most important projects I've ever come across in this community. It's an ode to creation and preservation, and a part of me is still in disbelief. Super special thanks again to Blissey, obviously for creating these masterpieces, but also for sending me a set of cards and helping me out with them so I could experience firsthand this incredible work of art. You should absolutely check out their channel, watch their videos. If you're feeling hungry for any of the technical details on this, or really just on Pokemon things in general, you're gonna love what they put out. All sorts of links are in the description. And thanks to you if you made it this far. I really hope you enjoyed this one. Perhaps a little bit different than what I usually do, but this was an extremely special case. Let me know your thoughts down below as always, and I'll see you all next time. Droomish out.